and chat with a real television icon in my eyes. And no, don't laugh, Richard. Because there isn't anything in television that Richard Holloway hasn't done. A phenomenal man, a gentleman who's taught me so much personally in television. And if you look at his CV, his back catalogue, if you look at everything that he's done, it really is ridiculous. As you've seen from all the pictures that have come up, Richard has touched every element, every form of entertainment over the past 50 years.
I just want to make it clear that 50 years ago, when you're 10, you have a choice of either going up chimneys and sweeping them or going into telly.
Yes.
And I chose telly.
So Richard is the man behind some of the most successful global entertainment TV shows. X Factor, Britain's Got Talent, the whole portfolio of Got Talent. The Muppet Show, Spitting Image, Family Fortunes. and by the way, before we move on, there is an interactive Family Fortunes DVD available. It's perfect coming up to the festive season. Get it early while you can. The Price is Right, New Faces, Supermarket Sweep, 15 to 1 to name a very, very few. Now, over the years, he has worked with some huge names, big talents like Barbra Streisand, Peter Sellers, Julie Andrews, Roger Moore, Elton John, Christopher Reeve, Sharon Osbourne, Sylvester Stallone, and of course, the Muppets. Like I said at the top, he is a gentleman who we can learn so much from. So let's put your hands together, Mr. Richard Holloway. Now, first things first, Richard, how on earth did you get into television? Where did this all start? What happened?
Well, I left school after my O-levels, which was always a bit of a problem. That's me, probably about day one or day two of starting in the mailing room at ATV in Great Cumberland Place. And I did my O-levels, and I had a real problem with my parents and my headmaster, whereby they wanted me to stay on for A-levels with the dream of going to university, because it was not, you know, you will go to university as it is now. There's a possibility of going. And I kind of knew what I wanted to do, and I knew the sort of career path I wanted to make for myself. So I decided I was going to leave after O-levels, told my headmaster, told my parents, didn't go down too well. And I had two job opportunities. The BBC turned me down because I didn't have the qualifications. And ATV and Rediffusion both offered me a position in the post room at Great Cumberland Place or at Wembley for Rediffusion. And I said to my dad, I've got the opportunity here, Dad, of either ATV or Rediffusion. And he said, look, Richard, you're a song and dance man, I'd go to ATV. That was the only piece of career advice he ever gave me. And that's where I went. And I went into the mailing room in August 1965, in the mailing room there. And I was there for about 6 months before I got transferred to the studios at Elstree. And what happened in those days was they used it very much as a career path for young kids coming in, girls and guys, coming in, and they kind of assess you, just like we do with runners these days. It was sort of like the pre-runner of runners. And I went and worked in the mailing room at ATV House, and they had this fantastic system there whereby you're either on the early shift, middle shift, or late shift. And if you're on the early shift, then you were in there with the sacks of mail first thing in the morning. 6:30 you used to have to arrive, early train from Watford. And you used to get into the mailing room, you put all these sacks onto this big table, and at around about 10 to 7, you have this smell of Monte Cristo coming down the corridor. And it would be Lou Grade coming along to join the boys, have a cup of tea, big cigar on, and he used to say the same thing every morning, boys, just give me the post with the American stamps. Doesn't matter who it's addressed to, just give me everything with American stamps. And it didn't matter who in the company, any of the other directors, if it had anything from America, Lou took it. And he did that every single morning. And we kind of, you know, he was really good. He was very good at sort of chatting to you, putting you at ease, and making you feel as though you were important, something to offer.
But you'd always wanted to work in television?
Always wanted to work in television. I was in the Boy Scouts gang show when I was about 10 or 11. Ralph Reeder, Golders Green, all of that.
And did that give you a taste for television?
Oh, yeah, I loved it.
Yeah?
Yeah, I loved it. I loved being on stage. It was great. And then I got to know Jimmy Perry, who owned the Watford Palace Theatre, the rep company there, with his wife Gilda. And I worked there and did the get-outs and get-ins. And I just loved being in the theatre. But I knew that this was the industry, but this was the wrong bit.
Yeah.
The theatre was definitely not for me. And I got into the whole, I watched the television, I watched Sunday night at the London Palladium. I loved all that stuff. And so that was the route I wanted to take.
So from the mailroom, from emptying all those sacks of mail onto the table, how on earth did you get to producing, coming up with ideas? How did you climb the ladder, so to
Well,
speak?
it's a long
Apart from bloody hard work.
It's a long process.
Yeah.
So I left ATV House at Great Cumberland Place after about 6 months, went to the studios at Elstree, did exactly the same thing without Lou Grade being there. And because you're there with all the other producers, directors, floor managers, it was a really buzzy site. ATV Studios was really buzzy. There's an enormous amount of output coming from there.
What was their big show at the time?
Well, Sunday night at the London Palladium was the biggest variety show. But there were things like Dickie Valentine, the early Eric and Ernie shows, Frank Ifield series.
So there was a lot going on there.
Emergency Ward 10 was going on, loads of drama series, The Plane Makers. A lot of these titles that, well, some of the people like Pat Richards there, he'll remember because he was there. So a lot of those big shows were all taking place there. And again, you were sort of, again, just like being a runner these days, you were assessed. You could see if you showed a passion and enthusiasm. I worked every weekend for nothing, just to go and work on the floor. So you go and chat up the floor managers and say, I'll come along and work on the floor for nothing. And I did the Palladium for about 6 or 7 months, every Saturday and Sunday. The floor manager there, a guy called Bruce Chandler, he used to come and pick me up from my home, and I'd go into London and I'd just do the running for zero. But it showed an interest and a passion, and you could learn so much. I mean, they didn't have, when you get onto that whole sort of floor manager trail, they didn't have then researchers and runners like we have now. You were a floor manager team of 3 people, and depending on the size of the production, you were assigned the show. So you went and did the show. You didn't just go and run the floor. You did everything. You did the pre-production, the production, the post. You were there as part of the show.
That's
so it's changed
significantly.
A lot. I mean, the Dave Allen show, which was a kind of a life-changing show for me, in many, many, many ways. And I don't know if people remember God. I was there.
That's a sweater. That's what that is.
And it's a haircut. So I was there about 19, I guess. 18, 19. And I used to do all the cue cards for Dave. It was live every Friday night from the studios at Elstree. You can see there's black and white camera there. So we were shooting it in black and white. Unfortunately, none of these shows, well, hardly any of them still exist. But on one particular occasion, so I used to be, if anybody can remember it, there used to be a gorilla that came on from time to time with the guest stars, and I was that gorilla. I had this gorilla outfit I used to pop on. I did Dave's cue cards, I was the gorilla, and on one particular occasion on his monologue, and he always used to sit on the desk there, as you can see him, and you can see me holding the cue cards, I got them in the wrong order. It's live pandemonium. So he came down to the studio floor, threw all the cards up in the air. We're all live here, and I'm terribly apologetic. You've screwed up the joke, so on and so forth. The producer screaming down my ear. And Dave just made, he made the whole thing into a bit of an event, because the audience love all of that. The following week, which I didn't know about, the following week, 2 girls from Liverpool wrote in and said, this is outrageous. You should learn the script. What are you doing? This poor guy here, he's doing his best. He's trying to help you out, and you're. So Dave read out this letter and said, these 2 guys, you've got a bit of a fan club here, Richard. And he said, maybe you should come up here and talk about it. So then he introduced me, and I had my headphones on, and he interviewed me on the set and said, what do you think about this? So I've got the headphones around my ears. Dave's interviewing me. I'm all a bit of a fluster. I'm 18, 19 years of age. And he said, how do they get in touch with you? So he said, what's your telephone number? And I said, Watford 27639. And as I said this, the producer, a guy called Colin Clues, is going absolutely mental. saying it's live, it's gone out on air, there's nothing we can do about it, you're going to cause chaos. And I did cause absolute chaos. The Watford Telephone Exchange was closed down. My mother thought it was a hoot. My father wasn't too impressed. And there's a whole splash about it in the newspaper the following day. And cutting a long story short, two record producers from EMI, from Parlophone, thought this is quite fun. You know, this guy's the gorilla on the show. He does the cue cards. He's getting a bit of a profile. Why don't we see if he can sing? So they called me up.
This is a page I didn't know about.
So they said, you know, would you pop down to the Abbey Road studios and see if you could sing? So I said, yeah, sure, I'll be a hoot. So I went down there and I did this sort of demo and I made this record. And then I sang the record on the show. For 2 weeks, I sang one. The first side was called Take Me, and the other side was called A Little Bit. And I sang it on the show with those guys there playing live in the background, Ronnie Stevenson and the rest of them. And the rest, as they say. It was a hoot.
Well, you don't know this, but we've actually got that record.
Oh, I hope not.
No, we don't. No, we don't.
Thank the Lord.
I wish we did, but we
Sharon
don't.
Osbourne did that to me at a rap party for the X Factor, and she got hold of a copy. Her manager has got every single single ever released, and they played it at the rap do.
Fab.
It wasn't that many. It was only about 3 or 4 years ago.
So after this, with the cue card debacle and being the gorilla on the show, obviously you're up and running now.
Yeah.
Your career is established in television. You must be quite pleased with where you are and what you've been doing. So how did you eventually get to work with people like Gene Kelly, Liberace, of course, Mia Farrow, and, of course, Simon Cowell?
Well, Liberace came immediately afterwards, after this show. The same producer, a guy called Colin Clews, was the producer of the show. And it sort of was a good link in here, as though we'd rehearsed this. There's a good link in here because with the proceeds of the record, I bought a brand new Mini Cooper S cash.
Times have changed.
How much do you think a Mini Cooper S cash cost in 1969? Sorry?
17?
17 grand? 17 grand, you buy a house in 1969.
£900.
Close.
Yeah?
1100.
1100.
1100. So I bought it cash, and so I had this beautiful little Mini Cooper S. So then we go and do the Liberace show, and here I am. What an embarrassing picture that is. And I was on AFM now. I'd been promoted from a call boy to an AFM, and this is 1969 also. And he's charming. He's absolutely charming. One of the nicest people. And, you know, all that sort of schmarmy charm and Americanism, that's all part of his character. And, you know, the line that he used to have, and he used to go to the audience and say, do you like my rings? You should do, you bought them.
Obviously, your TV career hasn't gone up the ladder too quick because you're still wearing that sweater.
Yeah, I like that sweater. It was orange.
Right.
It was a horrible tone. It's better in black and white than it is in colour. But look how I'm looking at him. I mean, how embarrassing is that? It's with love in my eyes.
But did you... there's a fine line with people like Liberace, who are global stars. Did you feel, not necessarily uncomfortable, but did you feel, comfortable with people like Liberace, these big... Mia Farrow, for example, Gene Kelly?
I mean, the answer to that is yes. Yeah. And the bigger the star, the easier they were to deal with. And the nicer they were.
Because you do see people at the beginning of their careers who are very tentative, very nervous around superstars, so to speak. So I guess if you've got that relationship straight off the back, it must have been easier for you to work with these kind of people.
Yeah, it was. And the Americans particularly were really, really good. I mean, I'll get on to the Gene Kelly story. I have to be really careful about talking about Gene Kelly because I will get a bit emotional. And you know, he was a big part of my life for a very small period of time. But with Liberace, he asked me out for dinner one evening. He said, "Would you like to come out for dinner, Richard? I got some friends. It'd be nice. We'd go out for dinner." And so we'd been together for, 2 or 3 weeks doing this show. And I thought, yeah, that'd be kind of cool. And he had a lovely apartment in Cadogan Square, at the back of Peter Jones. And he had this big sort of phantom on 24-hour call. So I went along to pick him up and go to the restaurant. We went to a place called SPQR in Soho. and we were meeting some friends of his. So I arrived in my brand new Mini Cooper S, which I parked by the Phantom, and went up to the apartment, came back down. He's dressed, he's got the big silver fox fur on. He looks,
fabulous.
You can't miss him. And he said, "Is this your car?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I've never been in a Mini, let's go in your car." So he sent the chauffeur off for the night, and we went in my Mini. And I'm driving out Oxford Street with Liberace in my Mini, and people going, and we went to SPQR. Again, we won't expand the story too much. We went to SPQR, and it was lovely. But the guy who was there having dinner with us was a guy called S.J. Perelman. Anybody, S.J. Perelman? An amazing New York writer, satirist, wrote for The New Yorker, did the Marx Brothers films, and a hooker. So picture the scene, me, 20 now, Liberace, S.J. Perelman, and a hooker in the Italian restaurant in Soho. And all of S.J. Perelman's jokes were all about the hooker. She just played the feed. And we had a most extraordinary dinner. And then Lee and I finished up going to Danny LaRue's club in Hanover Square.
Wow, fabulous. Which
Which was awfully uncomfortable because Danny knew that we were coming. And he'd obviously said, when Liberace comes, it's that table at the front, stop everything, lights all go to the back of the house and bring him down. And I'm sort of with Liberace going down to it's like, it's slightly uncomfortable. But it's good fun.
I bet it was.
Yeah.
I bet it was. Liberace was phenomenal. Great performance.
Yeah, he was amazing. He was amazing.
And that was for the UK, that TV show?
That was for the UK and the US.
Yeah.
It was when Lou was doing, and it was part of his downfall in some ways, when the franchise was renewed in 82. Would it be the 82 franchise? The 82 franchise. Yeah, thank you, Pat. The 82 franchise, part of his downfall because he did a lot of transatlantic shows. And the IBA were not that thrilled with him for that. And they, but out of it came the Smith and Hemian years, which were amazing years. And the Muppets, of course, which was an extraordinary time.
We'll talk about the Muppets a little later on because, for me personally, the Muppets was a pivotal turning point in my career. Not as a kid, but the way the Muppets was made. But we'll come on to that a little bit later on. So, working with Liberace, one of your career highlights?
Oh, yeah, especially at such a young age.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of my highlights. And there have been just so many because, spooling on 40 years, one of the highlights of doing things like Got Talent and The X Factor, which are amazing shows. And, I've got a different responsibility for those. But those sort of formative years when you're learning so much, they hold you in really, really good stead, dealing with talent particularly, dealing with producers, crews. That's that kind of experience you can't buy.
Yeah. And when you were going through shows like this with Liberace, which are big shows, who was your mentor? Who did you turn to? Who did you speak to about whether you're doing the right or wrong thing?
Well, I suppose, and I can't say, my first mentor was a guy called John Scofield, who was the producer-director of This Is Tom Jones, which we did in the early 70s. And I have to thank him a lot because he gave me, he made me a producer first of all, and he made me an AP. Well, not an AP. I was AP earlier than with John, but he made me a producer very early. So I've always got a lot to thank for him. But I think Lou Grade was an extraordinary man to deal with. There's one little thing he did that I would always remember, and his office was at Great Cumberland Place. And, we were doing the Tom Jones show, the Humperdinck show, Liberace show, Des O'Connor show, Val Doonican show. All these shows we did at Elstree, Studio D Elstree. It was like, that was an entertainment mecca. And he had this fantastic knack of, he'd leave his office at, say, 11:30, jump in the Phantom, drive to the studios. His PA would tell reception that he's on his way. Reception would say to the floor staff, Lou's on his way. He'd walk through reception, he'd walk into the studio, everything stopped. He was just that kind of guy. It was like amazing. And everything stopped, and he'd walk up to this, walked up the floor manager, walk up to the talent, and he'd say, Tom, you all right? Always looking after you? A few cigars for you. Bottle of Dom Perignon? Any problems? Speak to me, I'll sort them out. And he'd go back, and you'd carry on shooting he'd be out in 5 minutes. Back in the car, back into the West End for lunch. But just that appearance was amazing.
And it made you feel comfortable in what you were doing and make sure you were doing the right thing.
Yeah. And, you know, he was kind of like he's a man of his word. I had an issue some years later, which was, well, they're fortunately, I think neither of them are with us any longer, so they're certainly not here. But when we were doing the Muppet Show, Jim Henson wanted me to go over to Los Angeles and be the first AD for the Muppet film, the Muppet movie. So we'd done 2 series, and Jim said, you know, would you come and do the Muppet film? I said, love to. So
he knew you because of all the work that you'd done with all these big stars.
Yeah. And I'd done.
So you
4
built
years
quite a
with
reputation
Smith
for
and
yourself.
Well, I guess so. I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
And we had 2 years of doing the Muppet Show with some of the biggest stars in the world that we had there. I mean, it's easier to say who didn't do the Muppet Show than it is that who did do it in some ways. But I had an agreement with the senior management at Elstree that I could go over there. And as soon as Jim left to go to California to do the film, they came to me and said, you can't go. And I thought, wow, this is a pretty poor show. So you said to Jim, I can go, and now Jim's out of the country, you're saying I can't go. Yeah. We need you here. We need you to do a series called Bonkers with Bob Monkhouse and the Hudson Brothers. Bonkers it was. And I was really unhappy about this. So I wrote to Lou and said, you know, this is the situation. I feel really aggrieved that I've been treated this way, and if there's anything you can do to help, I'd really appreciate it, because I'd really love to do the film. It's a great opportunity. So I'm doing Bonkers, and a guy called Peter Harris was directing it. The phone rang, and it's a guy called Dennis Bassinger, who was the head of the site. He was kind of the admin director. And he called up, he said, is Holloway running that show? He said, yes. He said, send him up to my office now. Oh, well, we're in the middle of shooting. Send him up to my office now. So, shit. So Peter called a tea break, and I went up to the office and said, you better go and see Dennis Bassinger. So I went up to Dennis Bassinger, and he had a bit of a stutter, and he smoked a pipe, and it was like a train engine. There's smoke coming everywhere, and he was beside himself with anger. And he said, did you write to Lou Grade? And I said, yes, I did. He said, how dare you write to Lou Grade? And I said, well, I wasn't happy with the decision that was made. You know, you said yes, and then you said no, and I wasn't happy about it. And I thought, who can I go to? I can't go to you, because you've made that decision, so I thought I'd go to Lou. And anyway, he really tore me off a strip. And anyway, conversation finished in about 3 or 4 minutes. He said, you're going to Los Angeles. Now, you better go down on the studio floor. I don't want to see you again. And I went down the studio floor, and I went to Los Angeles and did the film. And I saw Lou, in the Muppet film, the part of Lou Grade in the film was called Lou Lord. And it was played by Orson Welles. And Orson Welles played the part of Lou Grade. And when we were doing that scene, Lou came into the studio for some shots and some publicity stuff with the 2 Lou's in the room. It was a great scene. And he came up to me and said, got your own way then. I said, well, no, it wasn't that. It was that. He said, no, you're right.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the Muppet Show, because if a lot of people in the room want to get into television, and the Muppet Show for me was a pivotal turning point in my career. I'll be honest with you, Richard, because when we made Boys and Girls with Chris Evans, one of the first things that Chris said we should do was watch the making of the Muppet Show.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Right,
because
okay.
it was my first venture into primetime Saturday night
Yeah, it was
television.
a good show.
It's a fabulous show, and if anyone hasn't seen it, go and get the DVD for the making of the Muppet Show, because it basically teaches you and tells you how good television should be made, because it was meticulous. Every single detail in the Muppet Show was thought about a dozen times.
Yeah.
A dozen times. And I think, what was the process? It was initial script reading Monday with the star. Sunday with the star.
Yeah.
And then the star was in for the whole week.
Yeah, the star. So we'd have the initial script meeting on the Sunday. On Monday, we would have some form of rehearsal with the star. Tuesday would be band call, a music record. And then Wednesday, Thursday shoot, and depending on the star, then you might shoot a half day on Friday. But you shot each show on an average of 2.5 days a week.
And lots of different characters, i.e. the Muppets, lots of script writing, but everything was
Genius script writers.
phenomenal, absolutely
Frank
phenomenal.
Oz, who played Fozzie Bear, Piggy, and Animal, and he's a big movie director now. I mean, he's You know, he had a real hang-up about doing Piggy, because call me my darling. Yeah, and Frank's like, he's quite butch, you know, and he likes to be butch, and he didn't like to actually be Piggy. And people are like, oh my God, look at the guy that does the pig.
It's you.
It's you. So he had a bit of an issue with Piggy to begin with. But he was just brilliant with scripts. And Jerry Jules, who's no longer with us, he was the script editor. We had people like Chris Langham, who was a super writer in the UK. We had a big writing team of about 5 or 6. And Jim played a huge part.
Mm. And when you put all that together, it just goes to show you that it was such a good show.
Oh, it was an amazing
phenomenal show.
It was 5 of the happiest years.
I can imagine.
And 5...
But hard work as well.
Yeah, very hard work. You know, the studio routine then was, if we were doing shows without an audience at Elstree, there used to be 10 till 8 shooting days with 1 meal break. And everything was geared to that. You know, you only had 2 meal breaks if you had an audience show in the evening. And you'd be there 10 till 8, and sometimes we'd have what we call double headers with 2 guest artists on week. We had one double header, I'll always remember, with Rudolf Nureyev and Raquel Welch. And I don't know if anybody has seen the Muppet Show with Rudolf Nureyev, but he dances with this life-size pig.
That's apt.
Very much so. And there's a lovely guy called Graham Fletcher from the Opera House, from the Royal Ballet, from the Opera House. He was inside the pig. And we did this whole routine with a stuffed pig, and Graham Fletcher and the pig, and Rudy would throw the pig around, and so on. It was great. And he was fantastic. He was fantastic. But he insisted on doing bar every time he came to the studio. Even if he just left for 5 minutes, there's bar there, a mirror, he'd have to do bar. So it drove Jim nuts. And he kept on saying, Richard, can you not? I mean, we can't remember the time for this. I said, Jim, he has to do it. That's what he does. If we try and interrupt it, he's just going to be grumpy, so let's just live with it. So we finished the shoot, and it was fine, and Rudy goes away, and it was an amazing show. And then the following day, Raquel came in, who was doing a routine with a spider. And she's there in a leotard, and she was a real pain in the arse. Very difficult. Nothing was right. Shoes weren't right. Makeup wasn't right. Nothing was right. And it was quite a difficult shoot. And we finished the week, and Jim and I always went into the bar and did notes for the edit. And we were standing in the bar, and he said to me, well, what do you think? And I said, I thought it was an amazing week, Jim, amazing. He said, who do you prefer, Rudy or Raquel? And I said, for me, Rudy, every time. It was amazing. He said, yeah, but who'd you rather watch dance in a T-shirt? And it's like, I mean, Jim, you're Kermit the Frog. You don't say things like that. Hiya! Exactly.
What moments would you pick out? What advice would you pick out? And from being on the floor at the start of your career to working on big, epic productions like this, has there been anything up to this point that was consistent in what you did in television? And what advice would you give to us now?
I would say planning. Planning is really key. I think, and this is something I've said to many occasions when I've been either interviewing producers and directors or giving talks or doing articles. I think the best piece of advice for anybody coming into the industry that's either in it already or about to be in it, once you're in a position of employing people, always employ the best. No matter how much they may know more than you, the best lighting director, the best designers, the best cameraman, always strive for the best, even if they might be difficult people to deal with, because there's always a way we're dealing with people. Make sure you work with the best. And I think that's really, really important.
And on the Muppet Show, obviously, you did.
Yeah,
Work with the best.
yeah, we had an amazing crew.
Phenomenal.
Amazing. And at the ATV studios, they were amazing technicians there. Fantastic technicians.
So what has been the biggest change, do you think, in television since these days, where you had a week to plan a show, where you had a week to record a show, where big global superstars would come on TV shows at the click of a finger?
Well, I mean, I think the difference from then and, well, there are many differences. But one of the biggest differences in terms of planning is we don't have as much time. We don't have as much pre-production time or planning time. We get a lot of commissions that are done quite quickly. You know, we want it a week on Tuesday. We have a lot of that. We have a lot of issues financially in terms of, you can't employ people for long run-up periods. You just can't. Because they are big. I mean, things like well, the X Factor or BGT, for instance, which leads me on to the differences, I suppose. I mean, technologically, the differences are extraordinary. I mean, I used to do a series called New Faces, which we brought back with, which Marty Kane, God bless her, she presented, and she was an absolute joy, and it was sort of an early incarnation of what we do with, say, the X Factor now with the judges. You know, Nina was very much a forerunner of Simon. You know, she was, I mean, even Mickey Mouse said, my God, I thought I was bad, but Nina, you're quite something.
It was interesting how the judges were sat in a booth like the two guys in the Muppets.
Yes, there was no accident there. That was no accident. There, we thought that very much, the Statler and Waldorf of New Faces. When we were doing, what's the purpose? Oh, yes, so technologically, it was very, very different. And New Faces, we used to cast, I mean, we get quite a lot of stick sometimes from the press in terms of BGT and the acts, and some of them are sort of semi-professional and professional, and they haven't had a break and so on. We did exactly the same with New Faces. They were not all amateurs. Some of them were amateurs, some people needed a break. We were just presenting talent that people had not seen before.
You put them on a national platform.
Completely.
Because there were a lot of comedians, a lot of singers who were, you know, touring singers.
Completely. Comedians. And, you know, they have the whole thing with jugglers and acrobats and trumpet players and so on. Trumpet players. We had an act called the Silver Trumpeteers. And there were 5 guys who played silver trumpets. And this is, again, this is going to go over a lot of people's heads here, but you'll appreciate it. And we used to have a guest judge every week on New Faces. So it was Nina and I think Laurie Mansfield were in the box. And we had the Silver Trumpeteers on, and I wanted a guest judge. And I thought, I tell you what, Eddie Calvert, trumpet player, be amazing. He'd be amazing there's a critique. So I called up Eddie Calvert's agent. I said, is Eddie available for whatever the date was? He said, he would be available, but he died 4 years ago. I said, oh, God, okay.
Ouch.
Yeah. But technologically, changed a great deal. I mean, when we do the auditions for Got Talent and X Factor, we have somewhere in the region of about 35 cameras rolling at any one given time, with the cameras that are in the arena, and all the researchers are buzzing around with little cameras. I mean, it's just being unbelievably covered from every end. We don't get all those stories and all those reactions that we're all so proud of. It's not by accident, it's all by design. And Andy Allen was our director of programs when I was doing New Faces, and I saw him just after we'd done about the 2nd or 3rd series of the X Factor, and he'd retired. And he said to me, why didn't you do the auditions on New Faces? It'd have been brilliant. It's an opportunity lost. You missed out, Richard. You should have done that. And I said, Andy, have you any idea? We had in Birmingham 1 camera, 1 ENG camera. That was all we had.
No way.
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely right.
Just one
and you
camera.
Had to book it.
So everything was just shot down the barrel, 1 camera.
Oh, it's completely on location. On location. So if you're in the studio, no, you have a full six camera rig. But if you're on location, if I'm doing the auditions at the Willows in Manchester, I'd have 1 camera. So there's no comparison. Wow. Editing. You put all this material into a server and you just pull it all out. Hours and hours and hours of material.
Now, because of all that, because of the technological advances in how we make television, does that make it easier or more difficult? Because, like you said, every base is covered on Britain's Got Talent, every base is covered on the X Factor. Nothing slips through the fingers of yourself and Mr. Cowell. Does that make it more difficult to put out on air? Because we've all heard stories that it goes through so many edits. Those big shows.
It does. Does it make it more difficult? It makes it more challenging.
But how do you know when to stop?
I tell you what you've got. You've got more choices. And you could say that we have too many choices. You know, you can make and you can re-edit really quite quickly. We construct those shows. This year has been the quickest turnaround of them all because of people's availability, coming out of BGT, going into the X Factor, then Simon had to go away. So we had to do an awful lot in about 4 weeks, and our period of time to do the post-production work was cut down. But we can construct one of those shows in about 8 days from nothing. But if you then, with 3 days to go, we want to change the whole show. So you've got tons and tons of stories all in the server, all cut together.
Yeah.
But you can juggle them all up and say,
Right.
well, let's take that story out, let's put this story in, and that story out and put this story in.
Okay.
And we do that quite a lot, and we're quite hard on ourselves. It makes it harder because you do have those choices. If you didn't have the choices, you'd settle with something that you'd done earlier.
Yeah.
And in some ways, the show could have been better for it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've talked about some of the shows that you've been involved with. Let's take a look at a selection of all the shows that you've been involved in and put together.
2, 3.
Hey, wasn't that dull? Swing, guys. Do it.
Thank you and welcome back to New Faces 88, where just before the break we were being entertained by a zany lady, Isabel Duncan. It's obvious what you thought about her. I wonder what our panel thought.
Obviously the highlight, Richard. Hello, thank you. Hello and welcome to All Star Family Fortunes.
And here is, it's George Sampson!
Please welcome my hero, Beyonce.
Big shows.
Yeah, they're the best.
Absolutely.
And the live shows are even better. I love doing the live stuff.
Now, one thing that all those shows have in common, and we talked about this downstairs earlier on, is format and how powerful and how strong format is. How do you know when you've got a good format in front of you? How do you know it's going to work? How do you know that the commissioners will take it?
Well, I mean, we all spend, all the development people, producers, you spend hours constructing, reconstructing, deconstructing formats. It's the combination of many elements, isn't it? Taking, say, Got Talent. Well, take Family Fortunes, for example, as a format. For me, Family Fortunes is the best shout out the answer show on TV. Because you've got the whole thing is all about the surveys. It's all about 100 people.
Which do actually take place.
Which all actually do take place, absolutely right. And you're always wanting to guess the answer. You engage the audience. What we're always trying to do, striving with television, whether it's entertainment or drama, is, we are all being welcomed into people's sitting rooms or bedrooms or kitchens or wherever they're watching the shows. And you want to communicate and engage with them in a way whereby they're totally into what you're doing. You want to, as a viewer, welcome this show into your sitting room. They want to welcome Vernon Kay into the sitting room. Want to welcome the Family Fortunes. They want to see the contestants, whether they're celebs or just punters. But they want to feel part of the show. And I think we always have to be very, very aware. And there's a part in the X Factor whereby, the shows are really big. They're very exciting. They're quite dramatic. When we're sometimes in the Wembley Arena there, and we can get completely and utterly carried away with the excitement of a particular part of the show. And you can leave there and think, oh my God, this was the most amazing night of television. Not necessarily. What's important is that you have the elements of making a fantastic night of telly, but you have to present that and edit it in a way whereby your mother wants to watch it in Bolton. And she feels part of that. In other words, they want to feel included. It's not like you do not want to create television whereby it's a party you've not been invited to.
Yeah,
that's really, really important. The elements of a format, you want to make it as multifaceted as you possibly can in entertainment now. So if you think about, you want great punters or you want great celebrities. You want to have a great format whereby you are engaged in storytelling, in gameplay, in personality, in winners, in losers. Can I affect the result of the show? And that's why I love, the X Factor and Got Talent so much, is that it works on all of those levels, right up to the point whereby actually the people at home also can decide who the winner is. And that's really important.
Yeah.
And we're improving on that every year. You know, the app that we introduced last year, and we had, I think it's about 2.5 million people downloaded the app last year. And they're really engaged in the show, not just in terms of being able to vote on it, but we used it. We were really surprised when Kat's here, Kat, that lady there, the blonde lady there, she's responsible for it all.
Put your hand up, Kat. Stand up. Go on. Take a bow.
But we wanted to communicate with the audience, to the people that wanted to be communicated with. I mean, sometimes people just want it to, they just want to be entertained and let it all wash over them. But some people actually like to feel part of it and they want to contribute to the show. And a couple of years ago, we introduced a competition whereby we gave the audience the opportunity to choose the songs the contestants were going to sing the following week. So we put up, these are all the choices for all the songs, these are all the contestants, which song do you want which contestant to? They went crazy. And we had a huge response of people actually wanted to take part. And the feedback we had was fantastic. And it felt as though, we've decided that. So Vernon's singing Rhinestone Cowboy because the punters out there wanted you to sing it.
Yeah, good. Because then they feel like they're pulling the strings of the show, so to speak.
Yeah, completely. So you want to include them, make them feel part of it.
Yeah. And is that a common thread, a common DNA that runs through most of your successful shows? Is that something you always try and put in there? Or is there something that is, that's Richard Holloway?
I don't. I mean, I'd love to think so, but I'm not sure that's. I'm too modest to say that.
Well, if that's the case, then why? Let me ask you this, because we spoke about this downstairs as well. Why does the X Factor keep changing?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, it's a really good question, especially when you make sort of the comparison with, say, us and Strictly, who have made very, very few changes over the years. They've changed the girls twice.
Yeah.
And as you so rightly pointed out, only because we nicked one of them once.
Yeah. And the lighting rig. The lighting rig isn't the original lighting rig on Strictly, so that's two things, really. And Bruce left.
Yeah.
That's maybe three things. But that's it. You
Yeah.
know? And I think we all know that because the X Factor is so powerful, because it is a big show, it always hits the headlines. So from your perspective, why do you keep changing it if sometimes it's not broke?
Well, because you want to keep on refreshing it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Simple as that?
It's as simple as that. Yeah, you always just want to make it slightly more interesting year on year. I think if we hadn't made some of the changes that we've made, if we were still producing the same show as we did 11, 12 years ago, people would be tired of it. You don't want to see Louis and Sharon and Simon as a threesome anymore. You want to see something that's fresh and new. And we've had lots and lots of different judges, as you well know. And we've played with the format considerably. This year's show, because of ITV and the rugby, which is a big event for ITV, we've had to change the format and tweak the format once again, just to make it all work schedule-wise. But when we do the show next year, we'll be looking at perhaps going back to how we did the structure similar to what we did last year. But you just want to keep on refreshing it.
Yeah. So it's new fresh for the viewer.
And you want to make it, appeal to the younger audience.
Yeah. Is that something that X Factor has always at the back of its mind, is our demographics? Let's get the kids involved on the show.
The demographic is important. It's important to ITV, the demographic. Let's face it, the whole show is about finding a pop star. And some of the people like One Direction and people like Little Mix and people like Alexander, they're appealing to that younger audience, Leona. And some of the people have appealed to an older audience, people like Matt Cardle, Steve Brooks. No, I'm not going to mention Steve Brooks. he never mentions anything nice about me, so I'm not going to say that. But you are appealing to that record-buying audience. I mean, that's you are trying to find a star.
Absolutely.
And that's important. Without the stars, the show wouldn't be the success that it is.
And it wouldn't be right of us to talk about the X Factor without mentioning Simon and his input, because he is so obsessive about how the show is run, how it looks. His involvement he's all over it like a rash.
Oh yeah, he is. Obsessive is the right word. I mean, he's an unbelievably charismatic, dynamic, obsessive, controlling, inventive, creative, sometimes difficult, always approachable, always happy to have the debate. Thinks he's right more often than he thinks he's wrong. Yeah, I mean, we've had a fantastic collaboration for the last
Absolutely.
14 years, from
I mean,
Pop Idol onwards.
Yeah, you guys have got a great portfolio together.
Yeah.
You know, that is outstanding.
Yeah, no, I love working with him. I mean, it's not all easy.
No.
But
what does he bring? Because he himself has admitted that he always wanted to be in television. You know, there's those famous shots of him in the audience on The Price Is Right, where he just loved.
He was a contestant on the Sale of the Century.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. And when you work with someone like that who's very similar,
if you go onto the Sun website, I think they still have it up there. Is there anybody from the Sun?
it'll definitely be on YouTube.
Is it on YouTube? Yeah. But it's a great piece.
Yeah, and is that easy for you to when you sit down and you discuss elements of the show with Simon?
Is it easy for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's easy to have the conversation. I don't always agree with where we finish, but it's a give and take relationship. He'll say, okay, look, if all you guys really think this is right, then let's do it. But my instincts are this. I mean, he's a huge television fan.
Yeah.
I mean, I often use the expression there. I think X Factor and BGT are like his train set. And when you've got a train set, like any child with a train set, what happens when you've got a train set? You get a train set and it's lovely, and then you think, actually, I want some new points. So you buy some points, you put some points in a little track there, and then you actually want some more carriages.
So you just want it to get bigger and better.
Yeah, you just want to get it bigger and better,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, because he pushes us a great deal too.
That's good.
So, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So, no, it's been a really good relationship.
Now, what's it like for you being the boss now? The man in charge. What are the secrets to running a successful production company?
The people. Primarily the people. Good producers. The good producers are absolutely paramount. And it goes back to what I was saying in terms of employing the best. And there are not, in big show, live entertainment, there are only a handful of good execs and good showrunners. There really are. And, the process that I've gone through at my time at Fremantle, Thames, and all the various incarnations of names, and when I was at ATV and at Central, is spotting young talent and nurturing it, and infusing them, and also making them watch telly. I mean, I just do not interview runners and researchers anymore, but I'll see them when I'm always at the shoots. Every time we're shooting BGT or the X Factor, and every time Simon's there, I'm always there. And you get a feel for the members of the production team, and you can spot them in 5 or 10 minutes if they've got something about them, if there's a passion there. And you can observe them, and if you think this person's really got something, you'll promote them quite quickly. Runners to researchers, researchers to APs, APs to PDs. And then you sort of see how creatively they work. And if you've really got something, somebody that's, the people like, Angela Naris and Ben Thursby and Amelia, Mark Siddleway, these are, great showrunners that we've had. And, I've lost 2 to America. We've had a bit of a brain drain over the years. And Sam Donnelly, she's gone out to the US. And it's quite interesting, the whole US versus the UK in terms of producers, because in the UK, doing entertainment shows such as I've just described, this is a real ambition to want to be a showrunner on these big shows. In the US, in Los Angeles particularly, what their aspirations are to do films, secondly to do TV drama, thirdly to do comedy, then documentaries, then entertainment, and then reality entertainment. It's like, okay, I suppose I'll just have to go onto a reality entertainment show. And here, it's totally different. People aspire to do these big shows. So hence, we've lost a lot to the US. If you look at all of the big entertainment shows in the US, they're all run by Brits.
Yeah.
All of them.
But that's only come about since big shows like Pop Idol,
American Idol,
American
Pop Idol
as well.
was a big change.
Yeah.
And Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah, huge.
That's all run by
huge
Brits.
Gear changes.
Yeah,
really.
Conrad and Rob Wade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is talent like that hard to come by? Is there a big pool of good young, enthusiastic showrunners?
There's a big pool of enthusiastic producers, but to have, you can often find, for instance, PDs that we have doing all the location stuff and storytelling, they're much easier to find, and it's not easy, but they're easier to find than the people that actually go into the studio and run the show. Those people who can go in there and grab hold of a big show, and the pressure's really on. When we're doing the X Factor, we do the X Factor on. We're live every Saturday and Sunday night. We do the music rehearsal on the Friday afternoon. Block some of it Friday night without cameras. Saturday we block the whole thing on cameras, and we're live on that night, and we have a guest star. And on Sunday we do the same thing. And it works really, really well. I can't say it always works like clockwork, but it always works really well. And it's all about the talent, planning, being able to be presented with any issues, any problem at any time, and they can deal with it.
How often do those issues come to you?
It's usually a crisis moment if it comes to me. Yeah, probably about 4 or 5 times in a series, something big will happen. What do you think about this?
That's a lot.
Yeah. Well, in a series of, 20 shows?
Yeah.
We go on the air last weekend of August, and we don't come off the air until weekend before Christmas. The X Factor is a long run. The X Factor is really intense. Whereas BGT it's a much more fun show. If I had the choice between doing either of the shows, BGT every single time, because it's fun.
Yeah.
And, the auditions are fun. The X Factor is quite intense.
Yeah, but pretty full on, I would
It
imagine.
is very full on.
So, what's been the highlight in the past 50 years for you? Are there any pivotal moments that you would pull out and say, I like that, that was amazing, that was phenomenal? Because you mentioned Gene Kelly, who became a close friend of yours.
Yeah, Gene Kelly, I'll have to try and say the story quite quickly, because the last time I told the story in front of an audience was when I got the RTS fellowship, and I was in tears, and it was quite embarrassing. But he did a show with us with Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet on the music of Gershwin. And he's a huge, huge star. I'm a huge fan. And he came along and we did this show, and we shot in Paris, and we had quite a few issues in Paris, and we had some issues with Steve and Edie with the stars. And Gene, he's a delight. He's quite particular, but he's an absolutely delight. And he said to me, when we were having meetings about going to Paris, he said, Richard, I don't want to take you to one side. But yes, Mr. Kelly. He was very much Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly, this, Mr. Kelly. We lived in an age of Mr. Kelly and Mr. Grade and so on and so forth. We now live in an age where I'll have a runner that's been working with us for 2 days, and they'll come into my office, hey, Rich, you want a cup of tea? It's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Don't kind of question it. But the familiarity is quite considerable now. Gene Kelly was saying, we're going to Paris for this shoot, and it's absolutely fine, but I just want you to know that I'm a big star in France, and, I know this is a small unit, but, you're going to need to make sure that it's not a question of protecting me, but you have to be aware that if people get to know that I'm there, it can cause a bit of chaos. So I spoke to the producer, a guy called Gary Smith, who was the guy that gave me the advice about always employ the best. That was his piece of advice, and he left the country. I said to Gary, Gene's a bit concerned about this. And Steve and Edie were in the room. He said, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. We're just going to do a bit under the Eiffel Tower, do a little bit of Sacré-Cœur, do a little bit of Montmartre. It'll be fine. He's there with his daughter, small unit, it'll be fine. So we go to Paris, we do the stuff under the Eiffel Tower, and we go to Sacré-Cœur, we get away with that, and we go into Montmartre, and word got out that Gene Kelly was there. Chaos. Chaos. And we had one little restaurant, which I'd arranged to have the first floor room to put Gene in for makeup and wardrobe. And I went in there, and I went up to see him, and he opened up the window, he said, see what I mean? So we the police, and those lovely French police sounds. Every time I hear those French police sounds with those funny little citrons, they're like, they were everywhere. And they corned it all off, and we did the shoot, and it was fine. And we did the show, and he did a whole American in Paris tribute, the whole music of Gershwin. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. So he left, and we were all very thankful. It was a great show. It was a big success. And then we were doing a show with Sandy Duncan, and the guest star fell out at the 11th hour. And Gary and Dwight said, what do you think about, guest stars that we can get hold of all the people that we've had here? And they talked about Baccarat coming over. We've done some shows with him and Glenn Campbell. And I said, for me, I'd love to see Gene Kelly come back. I didn't want to have Gene Kelly back. So Gary spoke to Gene Kelly's agent in Los Angeles. Gene Kelly said yes, and he came back. And the allotted time arrived when he arrived at the studio, and the car pulled up, and I went down to the limo and said, welcome back to Elstree, Mr. Kelly said. Drop the Mr. Kelly, just call me Gene. Like, oh my God. And it was an amazing moment.
Yeah.
And we did this other show and it was great, it was fantastic. And I loved him and we had spent a lot of time together. And then I went and stayed with him in his house in Los Angeles and we sat there drinking gin and tonics. He told me how they shot Singing in the Rain.
Wow. Good grief.
So that was amazing.
Yeah, and obviously emotional for you. All those things, all these.
Yeah,
highlights.
they're amazing moments.
Yeah,
they're moments that will stick in your mind.
So your career from the postal room at AVT all the way up to where we are now, it's just been ram-packed. You've never stopped working. You've worked on the biggest shows, not only in this country but across the world. Where do you go from here? What's next?
Oh, just do more of it.
Have you still got that hunger and that thirst for television, that passion for television?
I absolutely love it.
And it must be nice, going back to Simon, to see someone with that exact same passion that you have to work alongside each other. It must have reinvigorated your love for telly.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you're working with lots of younger producers as well, I think working with younger people keeps you young as well. I think that's good. I mean, I love the present music scene. And, I'm very fortunate. I have 4 stepchildren, sort of stepchildren. They're not really stepchildren, but they are sort of stepchildren, aren't they? Can I get away with that, Caroline? Yeah. And, they love music. So I learn a lot from them, and you learn a lot from guest artists on the shows. And, I just love, I love it. I've got a great passion for it. I can't imagine not. I mean, I'd hate not to be part of it all.
So because of your wealth of experience, have you ever been offered a commissioner's job or head of a network?
I was offered... I don't think I can answer that question.
No? I'll take that as a yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, well, fair, because to have someone like yourself in charge of a channel or, be a chief commissioner would be a huge advantage for anyone.
I'm not sure.
Why not?
I'm not sure. I mean, OK, I'm sort of let the cat out of the bag, but I've been offered a position at ITV and at the BBC many years ago. The problem for me, of being a commissioner is you're not actually making the show. And you can influence the show, and you talk about the show, and you talk about the casting, and so on and so forth. But if I can't walk into the gallery and say, guys, I don't think the cyc should be pink, I think it should be blue.
Yeah.
Then that's kind of what I do.
Yeah. Because one thing that...
I have this, Amelia often says, Amelia's the exec on both BGT and on the X Factor. She's doing both shows this year, bless her, and she's
knackered.
Absolutely, she really is. But she's really, really good. And whenever I'm in the gallery, and I'm always at dress rehearsals, and I had no idea that's what I did, but she pulled me up on it when we were doing BGT this year. She said, do you realise, Richard, that every time you've got something to say, you put it as a question? That is to say, I'll say, Amelia, do you really like that? And she'll say, you don't like it, do you? Well, it could be...
But one thing you said to me when we sat down initially for Game Show Marathon, I think it was your explanation of the formats. And going back to strong formats was, what I learned was the format will do its job.
Absolutely.
The format will work.
Especially formats that have been, tried and tested. I remember that when you were doing Game Show Marathon. Yeah. And brilliantly you did it too, and Family Fortunes came out of that. And,
yeah, it did.
And it's been a huge success. Is that, those tried and tested formats like Family Fortunes, The Price is Right, all these shows that will all come back and play your cards right, blockbusters, so on. They're all finely tuned formats. And for any host, doesn't matter how experienced they are, and whether it was Bruce when he used to do The Price is Right, he used to go into the rehearsal room and rehearse it every time we go into a new series. is that if once the host has got the hang of the format, once you know what the format is and you know it backwards, so that anything that's thrown at you, you know how to react to it, then you can have fun with it. It's just like when you're doing Family Fortunes, you have fun doing the show. You have fun with the contestants, you have fun with the audience, everything, because you know the format backwards.
And I think that's important because, from my perspective, once you know it, it becomes second nature.
Yeah.
It's just like riding a bike, and that enables you to have so much fun with the
and
show.
it shows the audience, going back to what I was saying in terms of how people are perceiving you at home, is if they see you comfortable, they're comfortable. If they see a nervous host as not, it's like, oh, I'm not quite sure what you do here and what you do there. I mean, an audience picks up on nervousness so fast.
Yeah. So how do you look at the state of play, so to speak, of television as it stands today? Because 50 years worth of experience, you've seen some highs, you've seen some lows, you've had some personal experiences which will live with you forever. Where is television at right now, do you think, Richard?
Well, I don't think television's at a crossroads, so as to speak. My God, that's a... that's technologically that's a scene doing a show called Showtime at the studios at Elstree, and that was at the crossover between colour and black and white, and we used to shoot the show in both. So on the right hand side there's a black and white camera, on the left hand side's an early colour camera, and so you doubled up on everything. So there were two cranes, every time there's a camera position there were two cameras next to each other. The whole studio floor was full of cameras, nothing could move because it's just full of hardware.
And empty seats in the audience. Interesting.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
Well, no, that's a rehearsal, you
Oh, is it a rehearsal? Sorry.
I'm wearing a tie.
Not that sweater.
And look at those desert boots.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I haven't. Yeah.
Fab.
Yeah.
So is telly in a good place?
I think. Is telly in a good place? Yeah. As a yes/no answer, yes, telly is in a good place. I think we're all searching for what's going to be new, what's going to grab hold of the audience. What are the big shows at the moment are Strictly, X Factor, BGT, I'm a Celebrity, and The Apprentice, and Bake Off. So those are the big shows. They are your standout shows throughout the year. Then you've got, obviously, there's drama series that come and go, but those are the big formatted shows. And they've been with us for quite some time. I mean, even Bake Off's been with us for quite some time now. So we're all thinking about what's going to be like. For instance, Millionaire was, the show however many years ago that was the standout show. When that came out, it's like, oh my God, this was an amazing show.
But it's always those shows where it's so simple. Who wants to be a millionaire? And everyone says, oh, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
What an easy format.
We do that every day of our lives. What is that new big show? And, you get little shows and you get commissions and short runs and daytime game shows and so on, and they're all important in terms of the mix. But, those really, really big travelling formats, they're hard. But, there's an awful lot of people that are all working on trying to figure out what that new show is going to be.
The one for me at the moment is Shove Halfpenny with Ben Shepherd. What's it called? Tipping Point.
Yeah.
It's on Blackpool Pleasure Beach. It's been sat in front of us for years.
Yeah. And it's on for an hour.
It's on for an hour. It's on telly now.
Yeah.
Put 10p in there, see if you can win a couple of quid.
Yeah, but it's nice. But the format's nicely constructed, though, isn't it?
It's once again a fabulous
format. It's like
format.
The Chase. I think The Chase is a good show.
Yeah.
I like Pointless. I think Pointless is a good show.
It's reverse Family Fortunes.
Yeah, it is. No, it's true. No, you're absolutely right. And a lot of shows will all be just another incarnation of a show that you already know.
Yeah.
Britain's Got Talent is New Faces by another name, but another facet to it. You've just constantly got to try and find bigger and better ways of doing something. Just you only got to tweak something sometimes, or just something that's slightly new within the format. We've got a show called La Banda, which is Fremantle in Miami are producing it. One of our showrunners is actually supervising it now. It's a psycho show, psycho format, and it's a spin on a similar theme. However, the mechanic within it is new and fresh and original enough to think, actually, this has got some real possibilities.
And do you get excited when things like that crop up?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that, because we are
Well, I've
here...
got an idea.
I've loads. Because we are at RTS Futures,
Yeah.
what one piece of advice, or several pieces of advice if you have them, for young people getting into television would you give? Obviously, you mentioned hard work. You mentioned...
Don't be afraid of getting in the bottom and working your way up.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that some of the most behind-the-camera talent are people that have come in as either runners or got a position as a junior researcher. We take a lot of junior researchers from runners. We use exactly the formula when I started of going into the post room, and we do with the runners. And with this last year on BGT, for instance, there's one girl who remained nameless. Shouldn't say her name, but she was a runner on BGT on the audition tour, and she was fantastic. She was on it. She was enthusiastic. She was keen. She showed that level of interest in what was going on without being persistent. Like, oh, for God's sake, go away. I don't want any more questions.
Yeah.
But she was. You just detected a fantastic enthusiasm, and we've made her a researcher on this series of The X Factor, and she's absolutely flying. There's no reason why she couldn't be a producer in 2 or 3 years, 4 years.
I think
if she sticks at it.
You were right. You do spot that eagerness and that willingness and that talent straight away.
Yeah, and a passion, isn't it? I mean, it's, the passion, I think, is really important. It's like trying to sell an idea to a broadcaster. If you're passionate about an idea, because they're all nervous, all the commissioners, they're all nervous about, they think that every single commissioner is taking a risk. I think that they should take more risks, personally. I mean, I think, the people that we are selling our wares to now are fewer and far between. There are only a few people. If we're selling a big show, we all know in this room who you're selling a big show to. There are only 3 or 4 people that's worth speaking to. So I think that's really, really important. I think in terms of the future and how I would like to see telly change, I suppose. And I've been very much we make programmes for the BBC and we make programmes for Channel 4, but I know I'm seen as an ITV person, which in some ways is not such a good thing, because the other broadcasters think, well, he's an ITV person. I've had that quoted to me on a few occasions, which is okay, because most of the bigger shows I've done is for ITV. But what I would love to see is an alternative commercial broadcaster, which is in competition, real competition with ITV. Because that's for us. So, every single broadcaster has a kind of specific brief. When you go to ITV, you kind of know what they want. If you go to Channel 4, you kind of know what they want. If you go to the BBC, you kind of know what they want. And if you go to Sky, which potentially could perhaps be, that big commercial broadcaster, if they ever wanted to be in competition with ITV, with, say, Sky One, you want to be able to have, I'll take an idea to ITV, well, we're sort of iffy about it. Well, actually, if you don't like it that much, we'll take it to Sky. Whereas in the States, for instance, you've got ABC, NBC, CBS, and maybe Fox. They're all in competition for the good ideas.
Yeah.
So, and you can't, you don't have that, that bigger marketplace, that commercial marketplace.
It's interesting with Sky because they just want to sell set-top boxes. So
that's the business they're in,
that's the business plan, yeah. No, you laugh, but they need formats that will encourage people to watch their channels.
What they want is they want noise.
Yeah.
So for Sky One, they want noise. So, for instance, what was it called, the big drama with Michael Gambon? Fortitude. Yeah. So they make a big splash with this. They spend a lot of money on the show. They produce it. It's an amazing show. It's on every hoarding everywhere. You know Fortitude is on, and you know it's on Sky, and to watch this show, you've got to buy a set-top box. So football is their biggest thing, and then all the sporting events. They've totally closed down sport, and they've done brilliantly at it. I don't think sport on TV would be of the standard that it is now without Sky. Because they've taken it, they've transformed it, haven't they? They've transformed Premier League football and cricket and When you watch a cricket test match, I was watching the test match against the Australians. They got cameras in the stumps, and I mean, there are cameras everywhere. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And if the BBC were still covering the test matches, they wouldn't have done that.
No,
because they didn't have to. Whereas Sky, I think we've got to give them something bigger and better. You know, cameras on F1 cars.
It's interesting that once someone does something that is innovative, people very quickly jump on board and do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, there's competition again. Is what I'm saying about competition.
Yeah. For example, you watched Jake Humphrey when he was on Formula One for the BBC. Completely reinvented sports broadcasting, as far as I'm concerned, with the iPad.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's true. It's true because he had the security that enabled him to speak.
Yeah.
He had the security that he had his information in front of him.
Yeah.
But because it's so small, an iPad Mini, it was neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But I think Jake's done exceptionally well. And let's talk about on-screen talent. How do you nurture them, Richard? And what have you seen? How has on-screen talent changed through the years that you've seen through television? Because primarily, I would imagine that people that we mentioned earlier on in this evening were all acts. They all did something. They were either a singer, a dancer, a comedian. No, a host is a host is a host, so to speak.
Well, I think you touched on something really interesting in terms of the past and the present. And if you think about all the people that presented either game shows or had their own shows, people like Scylla, for instance, a very good example. She was a singer, she's a pop singer. She gets given her own series for the BBC. Stuart Morris produced the show. He thought, this is a good idea. Why don't I just take Scylla out and start meeting the people? She's a very chatty person, very open. Take her outside. Fantastic piece of the show. They built on that format. Other people look at this saying, Scylla, she's got something more about her here. Maybe we should give her another show, maybe hosting a show, blind dates, surprise, surprise. And here is this personality who's developed their career, but she was a singer in the first place. So Forsyth was basically he was a redcoat for all intents and purposes. He wasn't a big entertainer, had a history of entertaining. Bob Monkhouse was a comedy actor. Bob Monkhouse actually is a really interesting character in terms of how he developed as an act or an artist or as a presenter. When we brought back Celebrity Squares in the 90s, Bob Monkhouse had been doing Family Fortunes for us. He'd been doing Bob Says Opportunity Knocks for the BBC. And I went to his house in Northamptonshire to talk about Celebrity Squares. And we were talking about the show and what we wanted to do differently. And we had this huge rig here where we gave, depending on which square you were in, you could win a car. The punter could win a car. So you had a choice of cars which you could put with the guys in the boxes. And it's a huge, huge set. Bob loved all of this. It was great. He was really producing it up. And I said to him about, how you should present the show and how do you feel about, when you're presenting the show. And he said, how do you mean? I said, well, you do have, it's quite a difficult conversation to have, but you do have this reputation of being a bit schmarmy, and, a bit cocky and a bit sort of know-it-all. He said, no, I know all that. You're absolutely right. And I'd like to sort of get over all of that. And I said, but when I'm talking to you and I see Bob Monkhouse and I'm chatting to you, and he's he was one of the nicest people you could ever meet. But he did have that reputation, didn't he? Everybody sort of spoke about it. He's always doing this and doing that. It's all part of the act.
On my first ever Family Fortunes, I did that walking down the stairs.
Did you?
Just as a tribute. I'll pop the cuffs and then pop the collar.
He used to do it all the time.
Yeah, he did.
And I was talking to him about the real Bob Monkhouse. He said, there is no real Bob Monkhouse. And I said, how interesting. He said, I can't be me. I have to be someone. So I said, okay, well, if you take that thought and doing Celebrity Squares, how do you feel about, presenting Celebrity Squares? He said, I think I'll do it like Dick Cavett. I said, really? So he said, yeah, I've watched Dick Cavett for years. I'm a big, big fan. He said, I think I'll sort of take some of those sort of Dick Cavett mannerisms. And when he's doing the show, yes, of course, he's Bob Monkhouse. He's highly experienced. However, he was playing the role of a game show host.
I find that fascinating.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
I found it absolutely fascinating. He's a fascinating man. Really bright. I mean, what he didn't know about game shows
Especially with his
was not worth knowing.
experience being a game show host.
Yeah, for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, he couldn't be himself. He had to
Yeah,
be.
he had to be. So
something.
I had to be because he was a comedy actor. So basically, he's an actor.
That's great.
So he had to act the role.
Wow.
Yeah, fascinating.
So, 50 years down the line,
Yeah.
how are you going to keep challenging yourself?
Oh, by quite simply of wanting to do new shows, wanting to make the shows that we already do bigger and better, or just better. Actually, they don't necessarily have to be bigger to be better, but just better. Whether it's with casting or whether it's with new technology or new editing or new storytelling. I mean, the storytelling is really, really important. On the game show, you're still telling a story.
Yeah.
And you're telling that story to an audience, and you want to engage that audience in the story you're trying to put over. And I think that applies to all entertainment formats. It's about storytelling and engaging and being welcomed into people's sitting rooms.
Fascinating. Richard Holloway, thank you very much.
A round of applause.
Have we covered everything that you'd like to cover?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I can sit here talking about telly.
I know. I know. So let's open up the floor. We've delved into Richard's career, 50 years. We could talk forever because there's so much stuff that we can learn from a guy like yourself who's got so much experience. But has anyone got a question for Richard? Just pop your hand up, yes, sir. We'll do. What's your name? Where you're from? In tribute to Scylla.
My name's Ebbs Akintade, presenter. A quick question about music television, because in the days when Vernon was on T4 in the noughties, early noughties, there we go. When we had Top of the Pops and so many music formats, even music game shows like Nevermind the Buzzcocks, they've all finished now. Do you think there's a place in TV for music television as a format? Because I know X Factor is currently seen as the biggest music show on television, which it is, but in terms of the Top of the Pops kind of music performance show, that isn't a reality show in the X Factor, Britain's Got Talent kind of way. Do you think there's room on TV for that kind of show?
A reincarnation of Top of the Pops?
Sort of, per se.
No. I don't, actually. I mean, I'd love to think that there would be. I mean, there's nothing I'd love to do more than a pop music show. I think, unfortunately, the two industries have, they were quite together as one, but they've moved further and further and further and further apart. We're fortunate with the X Factor in particular that because it is a music show, the guest artists that we have on a Sunday night, and we've had every major music act in the world without exception. The only person we've not had is Madonna. And, we ask her every year, and every year it's kind of like, well, I haven't got anything to promote, so then why would I be coming over? And, it's a promotional vehicle for the talent that come on. They release singles to coincide with appearing on the show on a Sunday night. There's a guaranteed 8, 9 million, 10 million people, or in the final 12, 13, 14 million people watching the show. And everybody that comes on the show, pretty well guaranteed to be number one on a Monday or Tuesday morning.
But not only that.
It's a vehicle for them.
The songs as well.
Of course.
The songs that are actually sung by the contestants, they go straight into the iTunes chart.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, when Fleur did, for instance...
Uptown Funk.
Uptown Funk. It was like phenomenal. Phenomenal. I mean, I prefer her version to Bruno's. But anyway.
But it took the wind right out of Bruno's sail, didn't it?
Totally. But my God, didn't they capitalise on it?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. No, that was a real coup for us, and she was brilliant. And I'm sure we will find this season that, with good choice of songs and good performances, people will go straight onto iTunes and they'll buy them. But to create a music show with big recording artists, it's just not going to happen.
No. From my experience...
I mean, I'd love it to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Jukebox Jury.
Yeah.
I thought Jukebox Jury was a great show.
Yeah, they don't rate. It's as simple as that. They just don't
Commercially,
rate.
they don't.
When we were doing T4, viewing figures just went straight down. As soon as we said, here's an exclusive performance from whoever, and it didn't matter who it was, people turned over. Because if you go to your Sky box and you look at all those music channels, there's so much available that's just on a loop. So for 1, 2, ITV, 4, 5 and Sky, to put music on, it just doesn't work. It's as simple as that. It's a shame.
A program like The Tube, for example, like, what was that, 20 years?
Tube's a good show.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, the Tube is more than just a music show. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's a cultural statement as well, the Tube.
Yeah.
People miss it
Yeah.
on Twitter, on everywhere.
The Tube, I think the Tube would have to go on something like 4, E4, BBC 2. Would never go on ITV1 or BBC 1.
And also,
Not now.
digital channels like, that are on YouTube, they have a lot of music content. And kids these days, I've got an 11-year-old daughter, she's always watching music on her iPad.
But do you
when we allow her to.
But when I was buying records, the record, you don't buy records hardly anymore, does it? I think there's one HMV shop left in London. There's no Virgin anymore.
No.
We buy everything off iTunes, don't we? And you just buy the album.
Yeah.
I bought, on Sunday, I downloaded 2 albums, Will Young's new album and Lana Del Rey's new album. And when I was driving home yesterday, I put them on my car. I'm playing back, I'm just skipping through the tracks. And I thought to myself, my God, when you were 15, 16, you bought, you treasured this album and you took it home and you played it track by track and you listened to it intensely and you played it again, and I'm going whizzing through the tracks like, I'm bored of that one.
But I think that's a good metaphor for how we watch telly.
Yeah,
You
totally.
just flick until you see something you like, just keep flicking.
I would call it the irritator.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
Very true. Anyone else got a question? A lady in the check shirt. Wait for the microphone 1 second. Oh, there's one over there. And what's your name, where you from?
Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm going to be a bit cheeky because I've kind of got 2 questions that I equally want to ask you, so I can't decide between the 2. The first one is big online broadcasters, Netflix, Amazon, whatever, they seem to be commissioning a lot of original drama. Would it work for entertainment? And my second question is, I've worked on BGT before as in the edit as kind of like a logger, and I would love to be a researcher. So how would someone get themselves on that kind of radar?
There's a file at the side for CV.
Because you said you promote people from being runners. So
Did you? You were a logger on BGT?
Logger, yeah. So we sit in the corner with our headphones on, and we don't really get to talk to anyone. So.
But did you come out on the audition tour as well?
No, we're in the
so you were doing it in the office?
Yeah.
So, okay, got it. Okay.
So those are my 2 questions.
So how do you become a runner researcher? Yeah, a researcher. How do you become a researcher? Then the exec producer is a girl called Amelia Brown. She's at amelia.brown@thames.tv.
Yeah.
And
I
you
know
write
that
to
much,
her
yeah.
and you say who you are.
Is it
and
really
what
that
you've done.
simple?
Oh, yeah.
Because I
So
always
that's
think
simple. I'm not
it's
saying
so
you're going to get the
simple
job,
because you can
but is that simple to apply?
But you can Google anyone's name and you know it's going to be first name dot last name at Thames.tv or whatever. So
Yeah.
surely everyone does that.
Well, we get a lot. Yes, I get quite a lot, and I've got to be absolutely honest. I just send them on to the exec of the particular show that they're applying for, unless something just grabs me. Someone comes up with a line. I think, oh, that's interesting. But I would not do that for runners and researchers. But no, that's the best way to apply. Make it an interesting. Make it an application whereby the person that's reading it at the other end is going to think, oh, that's an interesting person. Show the passion. I passionately love BGT. I worked on it as a logger 2 years ago. I watched the programme. I think it's the best programme on television. I would give anything to be considered to be a researcher on this programme. That's the kind of thing that makes a producer go, oh, she's really keen.
When we do Fortunes, we always have new staff
Yeah.
on board, young staff.
Yeah.
Always. In fact, every show I've ever worked on that's been repeated, it's never the same runners, researchers. It's always a constant turnover of young staff. And I know Richard said it several times, and I'm going to say it as well, but there is nothing worse than having a script, knowing that you're recording at 6, you're a bit frantic, and having the most miserable runner researcher stood by his side who doesn't give you anything, because you need someone to hold your hand and say, is everything all right? Do you need anything? And it's that simple, you know, and it's those people who say, look, I've got you this, you're ready for this is your script, it's all bosh, 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 we're on the floor at this time. That person you'll never forget.
Yeah.
And I've worked with 3 runners from Fortunes on other shows where I've gone, I want this person and I want that person because they're just bloody brilliant. You know, they always second guess you, and the good ones always get it right.
Absolutely, and especially with shows like Fortunes, where you want, you know, they're fun shows. You want to have fun people around you. Take Me Out is a classic example of, you know, a fun show.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a big cast and all those crazy girls who are amazing. You know, they're well cast. Susie Lamb and Mel Ballock that do the show. You know, they spend a long time choosing those girls. And the boys, you know, the boys are quite difficult to find sometimes. The girls are easy to find, but the boys are quite difficult to find. But you know, it's a really fun atmosphere down in the Maidstone studios when they're doing that show. But you need to have fun people to keep that bubbling along.
Yeah.
A great phrase in terms of production crews. I say this to them a lot. In terms of how their work ethic and getting, you know, what they're getting out of it. And they work long hours. These guys, you know, they work really, really long hours because it's quite intense. And I say, you've got to show that you've got to be having fun doing the show, because if you're having fun doing the show, the fun will show on the screen.
Definitely.
And okay, so you're the headliner, you're the person there coming through the doors. However, your experience has got to be fun. You've got to translate that. And the crew do that. If you've got a miserable bloody crew, it's like, God, I'm just going through the motions.
I've been fortunate that T4 was a good developing ground for young people who wanted to get on in television, and some of the guys and girls who were runners, researchers then are now execs of shows, you know, if not channels.
Yeah.
I worked with a guy on UK Play, a guy called Joe Mace.
Yeah.
He was my co-host.
He's
He's now in development at ITV
He's at ITV Studios.
Really good guy.
No, he's a good guy.
You know, very funny, always willing to do whatever was asked of him, and now he's got a major job over at ITV Studios. So it just goes to show that if you have got personality and you are willing to get on with it, you know, the mail room, like you said, and where you started, then it works. And as far as Amazon and entertainment, I think that's still, personally, I know it's Richard's evening, but personally I think it's still to be tried and tested. It'd be interesting to see how Top Gear
No, that will be very interesting, because it's sort of venturing into the end. Yeah, it is in a way. Yeah. I mean, the drama I totally get, and you know, it's great IP for them, and they can sell it all around the world, and that's very, very important. Entertainment is not quite the same from that point of view. What you can do with an entertainment show, because they're nearly always quite parochial. So you're appealing to your home audience. Entertainment in the UK would not necessarily travel in the British produced form to the US. Because you just don't have, you know, it's just not in sympathy with the US audience, and vice versa. We sell the X Factor and BGT to quite a few foreign territories, but they're never on major channels. They're all on like ITV2 type channels, E4 type channels in other territories. So for Netflix and Amazon, the answer has to be yes. There's got to be a future there, but I think for entertainment, it's you're going to have something that's maybe something like a challenge show. We used to do a show called Fort Boyard.
Brilliant. I remember that. I wanted to do it.
It's one. I mean, on the disappointments of one's life. You know, you're talking about the lows. One of the big lows is we used to do, for the early days of Channel 5, we used to do Night Fever and Fort Boyard.
Night Fever.
We used to do,
I remember
and they were butted up to each other on Channel 5 every Saturday night. You start off with Fort Boyard.
With Suggs?
Yeah, Suggs, yeah. And it was a whole list of celebs that used to come on, 2 teams, basically karaoke competition. And it was a really buzzy atmosphere in the studio, really transferred well. And this was on Channel 5. And Kevin Ligo, who was director of programmes at Channel 4, no, he wasn't, he was commissioning editor of entertainment at Channel 4, left there to become director of programmes at Channel 5. The first thing he did was cancel both programmes. And it was like, doesn't fit my brief, I want to do factual. I see Channel 5 as the future is factual. Future wasn't factual at all. And Fort Boyard and Night Fever had every single week over 2 million people. They've never had over 2 million people on a Saturday night since. Not that I'm bitter.
No. Interesting. Interesting. Lady at the front.
Hello, Tara Conlan from The Guardian.
Hello, Tara, how are you?
All right, thank you. When we've spoken before, you've said about the generation game, and you've said, as sure as eggs are eggs, it's going to come back. Just wonder, in your opinion, because the BBC are trying again with Miranda, yeah, what you think they should do to make it work? And also, do you think it's a bit unfair, because Peter Fincham came out in Edinburgh and said, we're going to publish the schedule for X Factor, here it is, so that Strictly doesn't go up against it, and they're ignoring that. Is that rather unfair, or with catch-up, does it not matter these days, really?
Good question. Well, first of all, Generation Game and Miranda, I mean, they've been talking about this now for quite some time. My intelligence says that the only reason they haven't done a pilot so far is basically her availability. But they're now continue talking about when's a good time for her to do it. Advice on how to make it work, I don't think I should tell the BBC how to make the Generation Game work. That would be bad of me. I don't think Mark Lindsay would be too happy about me saying, well, what you should do is this. So I don't think I can answer that. But I'd love to do the Generation Game, because it's a great show. It's classic BBC. Jeff, did you do the Generation Game? Jeff Miles here, who runs the Maidstone Studios. But you did it, didn't you? You directed it or produced it? Both. With who? With Bruce or with Larry?
Bruce, Larry, and Jim Dibs.
With all three? Oh, my God. Well, that's the guy to ask. Personally, I love Larry the best. I thought Larry was, for me, it was the most entertaining of the lot. As far as Peter, were you up in Edinburgh?
Yes.
Were you there at that session?
I was in that session, yeah.
You were in that session, okay. So I was in that session as well. I think the thing with the BBC and the scheduling or moving the schedule to cross over with the X Factor, I think what got to Peter, particularly on that session, was the fact that, you know, the whole exchange system with the schedule between ITV and BBC, and the exchange schedules. The last exchange goes to the BBC, from ITV goes to the BBC, and that's their last exchange. That's when that's their schedule published. Then the BBC have this ability to be able to move again. And, you know, they'd had all these exchanges, and sure enough, whether it's Danny Cohen or Charlotte Moore, whoever, they suddenly became a really competitive broadcaster. Now, you could argue, well, there's no reason why they shouldn't become a competitive broadcaster. However, Peter's point was, we are a commercial organisation, you're doing this as a spoiler, you don't need to do that. You'd had it planned well beforehand. Why just try and spoil, A, the enjoyment of the people that are watching the show, which is fair enough, but probably more importantly to ITV, of course, it has a reaction in terms of the numbers of the show. So X Factor gets hit, whatever that crossover is, 15 or 20 minutes, gets hit right at the very beginning, then numbers pick up again. And it's kind of like it's unnecessary. But, you know, you can't say that the BBC got every right to do it, but it's kind of like, what do you have? Why? Why do that? I mean, even Jay actually supported Peter on that, which was quite interesting. Jay Hunt, that is.
Lady in the pink blouse.
Was there anything else I should have answered there, Tara?
No, that was it. Okay. That was it.
Sorry, that'll have to be probably the last question.
Okay. Can we just just wait for your mic? There you go.
Hi, it's Katie from The Sun. I was just wondering, how many years left do you think X Factor BGC have got before perhaps audiences get tired with them, or do you think they can keep going?
Well, you know, you've got to say that nothing is forever. I mean, there's not a TV programme. I mean, Coronation Street can go on forever, and EastEnders can go on forever. An entertainment programme will have a lifespan, and whether it's 5 years or 10 years or 2 years or whatever it might be, I think what one's got to appreciate with the shows, those big shows that we've just talked about, is that the X Factor, okay, so the numbers have gone down year on year. I think you've got to look at and appreciate that viewing habits have changed enormously, especially in the last couple of years. I mean, the consolidated, without getting too technical about it all, the consolidated numbers for the X Factor, we're growing now by 2 million for every show on Saturday and Sunday, which is 1 million more than the consolidated was the year before. And all what this means is... Sorry?
What was that? How funny.
Someone having a fit.
He's on Netflix. It's faded up the wrong channel.
Or it's a spy from Danny Cohen.
Yeah.
So the core of this is that people's viewing habits have changed enormously. So people don't necessarily want to watch TV at the time of transmission. And I think, we've all got to appreciate that and kind of consider it more. Now, all the members of the press that are here are obsessed with overnight ratings because that's the story. They look at the ratings the following day. X Factor did this, Strictly did that. Strictly's beaten X Factor by whatever percentage. It's a disaster or it's a success. That's what you guys do, and that's fine. However, it's not a sort of a true story in where the numbers are. So when you look at the lifespan, one's talking about the lifespan of these big shows, is that while the shows are still, BGT this year is the most watched programme on television this year, by a long way. Will Bake Off beat it in the final? Maybe, maybe not. Launch Show didn't. So BGT is right up there. I think BGT's as a format is a more engaging format. I think it's got more legs to run. I think it's a more multifaceted show. And I think there's a lightness of touch that BGT has and a humour that BGT has. And I think our panel on BGT are amazing. And hence we've stuck with it, which kind of answers your point in terms of dabbling with it. We've got Anton, Dex, Simon, Amanda, Alicia and David. I think it's a really starry cast.
Very strong.
Really strong cast. Plus then, when we cast the acts really, really well, it's a really engaging show. And this particular year has shown that to be the case. I think it can run for many, many years. It's our most profitable show in terms of selling around the world. More territories take it than any other territory, any other show. X Factor sells around the world a lot. It will have a finite lifespan, but I think you'd then rest it and then you'd bring it back. I do. I mean, it's like Family Fortune. My God, the price is right. These, I don't know how many series of Family Fortunes we've done over the years, but a lot.
I've done
You've
12.
done 12.
12.
Bob must have done 6 or 7.
I'm 4 behind Les Dennis.
Are you?
Yeah.
So he did 16.
He did 16.
16, so 12 and 16.
Bob only
that's
did 9.
28, 9,
Yeah,
37.
And, Max Bygraves did 6.
Did he?
Yeah, I think
He should never have done 6.
I think it was 4 or
No,
3.
he didn't get to that. I mean, actually, there's a case in point. I mean, Max never really got the format at all.
No. But anyway.
Anyway.
But I also think a part of that is what's going to replace it? You can't take it off if there's nothing to replace your biggest show.
Well, also, why would you want to replace one of the shows that's still the number 4 show in the country?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's rather like, news of my death is somewhat, as the quote goes. I think as long as we produce the show to a standard which the public really, really want to see and engage with it, then there's no reason why we can't produce it for years and years and years.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid we've got to move on.
Oh, let that lady speak.
Go on.
So dying to ask you this as well. My name's Joy, I'm a presenter. So I just want to, you've made the point about sort of working with the best, and you've also talked about sort of nurturing talent behind the camera and all of that. But what about the new talent in front of the camera? What chance do we stand of working with someone like you? And what advice would you say give to someone like myself who's trying to be like Vernon, so I can work with someone like you?
We had this conversation downstairs.
Didn't we say that was the last question? No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I think for television and for new talent coming along, I think what's really, really important is representation. And I don't know who represents you. Right. Okay. I think you've got to keep plugging away at producers, at people like me. You've got to do as much work in terms of show reels, showing people your talents. you've got to sell yourself, you've got to have a passion. I mean, you're probably thinking, yeah, I've heard all this before. And you need a break. You need a break. And, you know, perhaps when you're setting your sights, and Vernon, you know, when he first started presenting, you know, he was there on E4, you know, try and get a foot in the door somewhere where you can be seen. Anything to be seen would be the only advice I could give you. But keep plugging away there. I mean, it's tough. I totally get it. It's really, really hard. And we see a lot of people presenting. People that are, what's quite interesting is when you're talking to development departments about offering yourself up as a presenter for non-transmittable pilots, run-throughs in rehearsal rooms, saying, you know, I'll do this. It's kind of like where I started doing it for nothing. I tell you what, I'll come in. If you want someone to come in and present a show for you, I'll come in and I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'm doing all of those things, and you've given me that advice before at a previous RTS event, writing ideas, pitching them, working for free, doing it all, blogging, you know, filming interviews. But with regards to someone like yourself, would new talent ever get under your radar at any point?
Oh yeah, sure.
It shows that you work on are huge, they're massive.
Oh yeah, I mean certainly on my radar. I mean every day I get from all agents and artists, you know, sending me emails, clips, show reels. I must admit, you know, when the DVD comes with the show, I must admit it does go onto a bit of a pile of, because it's just hours in a day. I'd rather see it as a YouTube link or just a link and I just pop onto it and have a look. I mean, you just got to keep plugging away. But I would suggest though, trying to get.
Do you know what kind of show you want to host?
I do. I mean, I'm a physio first of all, so I'm a chartered physiotherapist. So I do like the idea of telling stories and, you know, sort of factual, but I also love entertainment because I live, breathe, eat, sleep, X Factor. You know, Britain's Got Talent. Who doesn't? So it's true. So yeah, I do absolutely love entertainment, and I want to kind of do.
Loving telly is a good step.
Yeah.
I do say this to a lot of, especially the younger people coming in as runners and researchers. You know, I'll ask them about, you know, what do you watch on telly? If they say, well, I don't really watch telly, it's the end of the story as far as I'm concerned. You know.
How do I send you a link? Can I send you a link?
My email address. It's quite simple. Can't wait to open up the computer tomorrow. but you know, email addresses are so easy. Mine's richard.holloway@thames.tv.
/CV.
But I would say, though, speaking to the heads of development of the bigger companies, whether it's ours or Endemol or ITV Studios or whoever, I mean, you're talking about factual programs as well. So,
as well as entertainment.
yeah.
I love that. That is my, you know, that's my passion. But in terms of, I suppose, my USP, because everyone's talking about that these days, I also do fall into the category of, you know, factual documentaries, you know, from the health perspective, I suppose.
Yeah.
My passion really does lie within entertainment.
With a bit of a factual twist.
Yeah, you can say that.
Yeah, I would suggest that. I would speak to heads of development and say, I really would give that a try in terms of offering yourself. I'll come and do run-throughs, I'll come and chat, and I'll do something for nothing.
I'm doing a lot of that.
Yeah.
I am.
Okay, good. Well, do more.
It will happen. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Before we finish, you know, we should give Richard Holloway a big round of applause because thank you very much, Richard. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. Because when you sit opposite someone like Richard, you can't help but learn, and obviously enjoy the experience that you've had. Phenomenal. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us.